Hello, this is Jonathan Reish, and this is my presentation for Biblical Theology of the New Testament on the theology of the new heavens and new earth in Revelation 21, verses 1 to 5. The first thing God does in the Hebrew Scriptures is create a good world. 7 times in Genesis chapter 1, God declares his creation good. But in chapter 3, the good world is cursed because of the sin of humanity. And throughout the rest of the Old Testament, specifically in the prophetic tradition, we find the authors wrestling with what it means for this good world to be restored. And so topics like the restoration of the city of Jerusalem, the coming day of the Lord and the judgment of God, and the restoration of the earth are all dealt with. In fact, this theme dominates the Old Testament, and the theme of the new earth continues in prominence in the New Testament with the coming of Jesus. And so in Revelation chapter 21, we find the capstone, this theme coming to completion, and the eschatological hopes of the Jewish tradition being fulfilled. John's theology of the new heaven and earth in Revelation chapter 21, verses 1 to 5, stands on the shoulders of the Hebrew Scriptures, converses with the other New Testament authors, and provides hope for believers in Asia Minor suffering under the Roman military, economic, and religious systems. And there are really 3 themes that need to be dealt with, 3 topics, sub-themes, we could say, of this theology of the new earth. And the first is this: what is the nature of the new heavens and new earth? In Revelation chapter 21, John sees a new heavens and new earth, and John most likely has in mind the renewal of the earth that God originally made, and not the annihilation and replacement of it. Some have argued for this based on the destructive language used in other places in the Scriptures about the end of this world. But those texts are most likely, and probably best understood, as describing a purging fire, not a consuming fire that destroys, but a purging fire that purifies. And most notably, people would point to 2 Peter chapter 3, where Peter describes the burning of the cosmos to make room for the new heavens and earth that Christians are waiting for. But even in 2 Peter, the precedent that he cites is the flood of Noah, which of course destroys the world, but in the sense that it wipes clean the existing world so that it can be renewed. John does not imply the death of the current world in Revelation chapter 21, and some Bible translations use the phrase pass away, which is really unfortunate because I think it imports the modern English connotation of death, which isn't necessarily there. It's best to be understood as the simple, the old heavens and earth went away, or as he says in chapter 20, verse 10, that they fled from God's presence. John uses the adjective kainos for new rather than neos, which kainos gives the nuance of a qualitative newness, a difference. The new earth is a renewed earth and not just a replacement earth. And other New Testament texts, such as Romans chapter 8, 18 to 28, have the redemption of the created order in mind, as Paul describes this creation giving birth to the next, which makes this new earth analogous to redeemed human bodies. The second topic that needs dealt with is the relationship of the holy city to the new earth. In verse 2, John sees a holy city descending from heaven, and he calls it New Jerusalem. The city that John sees is not additional to the new earth, but rather another image in which to understand it. In the Jewish world, the earthly city of Jerusalem was a copy or model of the heavenly counterpart. John even spends some time in his vision in the heavenly counterpart to God's temple, in specifically chapters 4 and 5, where he is in the heavenly temple witnessing the praise of God. And he says that this new city is descending to earth like a bride coming to her husband. And so this marriage metaphor that John uses He uses this to describe the union of heaven, God's space, and earth, humanity's space. The two were separated from each other with the curse, and now they're being reunited and brought back together. The third topic, the final topic that needs addressed in this text is God's tabernacle with humanity. In verse 3, John interprets all of this with a voice speaking from the throne, and the interpretation is yet another metaphor. And the metaphor is God literally tabernacling, pitching his tent among humanity, using the Greek noun skene and the verbal form of that noun. And so throughout the Pentateuch, God's presence was experienced in a tabernacle, in a tent. And now the whole world has become God's tabernacle. There is no temple in this new city because God's presence and the presence of the Lamb permeate every corner of God's new earth. And what can't be missed here is the verbal link between this text and John chapter 1, verse 14, where the same word is used to describe the tabernacling of Jesus among humanity. And so in conclusion, this text would have provided hope for Christians suffering under the pressure and persecution of the Roman system. And in the letters at the beginning of Revelation, rewards are promised to those believers who conquer and overcome in the name of the Lamb. And this is the eschatological hope that they looked to, the promise of a redeemed earth, a renewed earth where God's presence permeates every corner. Thank you.